Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Konrad Gorlinski, and this is the news. In the region of Białowieża, a group of over 100 migrants, with the help of Belarusian services, made an attempt to force through the border again today. Some of the migrants were successful in breaking into Polish territory, but thanks to the effective response of Polish officers, they were arrested and then expelled. 2 Polish soldiers suffered injuries in the clashes. Migrants were transported to the border by trucks operated by the Belarusian services onto the wire fences in order to lower them as much as possible. Platforms were thrown, which were then used by migrants to try to cross to the other side. Towards the Polish services, stones were thrown, and since it was dark, lasers were used as well as stroboscopic lights in order to obstruct our efforts. In the last 24 hours, 206 attempts were made to illegally cross the Polish-Belarusian border. A spokesman for the 18th Mechanized Division, Major Przemysław Lipczyński, admitted that migrants and Belarusian services are constantly checking the tightness of the border and testing the reactions of Polish services to further provocations. Attempts are being made by water using pontoons. We're trying to do everything we can to function unconventionally, so the schedules of our patrols are scattered as much as possible, so no one could plan to cross at any defined hour when patrols are not occurring, or what we call a white stain in patrolling. More than 400 Iraqi citizens left the territory of Belarus today. So far, over 1,500 migrants have returned home. Some have where to return to in Iraq, but others have sold everything and they have nothing to come back to, so they'll be staying. And we also have to remember that some of the migrants are there in the role of hostages for the Lukashenko regime. They are not allowed to return and are kept there on the border to keep up the pressure. After yesterday's meeting between Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and Boris Johnson, the head of the British government emphasized the friendship between the two nations and expressed his willingness to cooperate in solving the crisis on the Polish-Belarusian border. Delighted to welcome Prime Minister Morawiecki to Downing Street today. The UK and Poland share a deep and long-standing friendship. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our Polish friends against those who would try to destabilize the integrity of Polish borders. Solidarność. From the beginning of the year, the border guard recorded over 37,000 attempts to illegally cross the Polish-Belarusian border. Detained migrants often carry knives and other sharp tools, which are used, among other things, to destroy the temporary fencing. The funeral ceremonies of Maurycy Mochnacki, an émigré activist, a participant in the November uprising, and founder of Gazeta Polska, whose remains were brought from France today, have ended in Warsaw this afternoon. The ceremony was attended by representatives of the highest state authorities. The coffin with the hero's remains will now rest at the Powązki Military Cemetery in central Warsaw. The ceremony accepting Mochnacki's remains began at the Warsaw airport. Then the coffin was transported to the Field Cathedral of the Polish Army, where a funeral mass was held, attended by representatives of the highest state authorities.
Jednym z praojców polskiej niepodległości.
He was one of the forefathers of Polish independence, and through his thought, the depth of his actions and his thoughts, he was also, I think, the forefather of Polish solidarity.
Solidarność.
He belonged to a generation of Poles who not only dreamed of an independent nation, but they also fought for it. Maurycy Mochnacki was a November insurgent and a representative of the Great Emigration. He's considered one of the most outstanding journalists of the partitions period. He was known for his zealous patriotism and uncompromising diagnosis of the causes of Poland's political defeats. Maurycy Mochnacki is one of the most important figures as far as Polish history is concerned, Polish culture, journalism, and of course in terms of the fight for freedom. For nearly 200 years, Mochnacki's body rested at the Saint-Amatre cemetery in Auxerre, Burgundy. Efforts to bring his remains to Poland were initiated 2 years ago by Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. As a representative of Poland, finally fully independent and realizing its aspirations to be a strong and significant country in Europe, I felt obliged to start work aimed at bringing one of our great countrymen back to his country. Maurycy Mochnacki was born on September 13, 1803 in Bojaniec. He studied at the University of Warsaw, but was expelled in 1823 by order of Prince Konstanty for belonging to the Union of Free Poles. In 1826, together with Ksawery Bronikowski, he founded the nationwide information and political daily Gazeta Polska.
Właśnie mija 195 lat.
195 years will just now pass on December 1st, since the first copy of Gazeta Polska was printed. We've made an album about this 19th century newspaper founded by Maurycy Mochnacki. This here is the first issue that was published by Maurycy, together with Ksawery Bronikowski, Tomasz Gąbka. Mochnacki later founded other periodicals, but the same thought accompanied him throughout: to unite the nation, to unite all the social layers around a fight for independence. After the fall of the November uprising in the autumn of 1831, the title of the daily was changed to Gazeta Codzienna. 30 years later, its original name was restored. Many prominent journalists, writers, and scientists collaborated with the journal, including the engineer and inventor Stanisław Janicki and the writer and Nobel Prize winner Henryk Sienkiewicz. And French fishermen threatened to ruin Christmas for Britons as they blockaded Europe-UK trade routes yesterday, escalating a row over licenses to fish in British waters. They temporarily blockaded the Channel Tunnel, blocking the rail link, truck traffic, and ferries in an attempt to exert pressure on authorities to grant them their licenses. Fishing rights plagued Brexit talks for years, not because of their economic importance, but because of their political significance for both President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Many French fishermen who inherited the trade from their parents and grandparents said they wanted to preserve their rights to fish within a 12 nautical mile zone in British waters, home to precious catch such as squid. We don't want compensation, we just want to work. I'm 46 years old. I have invested €2.5 million on a new boat. I've bought a new trawler because my brother, who's 35 years old, and my 2 sons will go out to sea with me. And I have another son who's 14 who plans to be a fisherman too. So I want to continue having the right to fish, and I want my children to do the same, just like their parents and their grandparents, as my entire family did. Britain and the EU agreed to set up a licensing system to grant fishing vessels access to each other's waters, but France says it has not been given the full number it's due, while Britain says only those lacking the correct documentation have not been granted. At the Channel Tunnel terminal in nearby Coquelles, trucks and cars quickly tailed back towards the highway after the fishermen erected barricades of burning wooden pallets and lit smoke canisters. The fishermen manning the roadblocks said they wanted to see progress by December 10th. We told ourselves that we'll keep our mobilization until December 10th. If on December 10th we don't have what we want, we'll gather around with our colleagues and we'll probably hold more actions. And believe me, the English will not have a magical Christmas because I think we'll ruin the party. Yes, we'll be party poopers, I'm sorry, but at one point they have to stop taking us for fools. Britain says it's respecting the post-Brexit arrangements, while France says Britain is not honoring its word. France last week said it was still waiting for 150 licenses from Britain and the Channel Islands. The dispute focuses on access to territorial waters 6 to 12 miles from the coast. Britain denies discriminating against French fishermen and says 98% of fishing licenses have been granted to EU boats since Brexit. That figure includes the roughly 1,700 licenses issued to EU EU vessels to operate in more distant waters situated in the UK's exclusive economic zone, which extends 12 to 200 nautical miles from the coast. Dover-Calais is the shortest sea route between Britain and the EU and has been one of Britain's main arteries for European trade since the Middle Ages. Before Brexit and the pandemic, 1.8 million trucks per year were routed through Calais. British lorry driver Jody Sr., who was sorting out paperwork in Calais, got stuck in the traffic and said the row over licenses was minor compared to the drownings of migrants trying to cross the English Channel.
You know, but I think there's more serious, you know, we're worrying about fishing licenses when there's a lot bigger crisis going on in the channel that we know about, you know. People dying, you know, and we're worrying about fishing licenses. It's crazy.
Senior said he had voted for Brexit. And finally, Australians fighting against forced coronavirus vaccinations refuse to give up. As every Saturday for months now, tens of thousands of people gathered across Australia's east coast today to protest against the mandates being imposed on them by their governments. While nationwide vaccinations are voluntary, states and territories have mandated vaccinations for many occupations and barred the unvaccinated from activities such as dining out and concerts. Recently, videos have surfaced from the Northern Territories showing military officers forcefully removing Aborigine people from their homes in order to lock them up in what the government there is calling quarantine facilities. Protesters gathered in front of the Victorian Parliament in Melbourne, as well as Hyde Park in Sydney, and at beaches in Brisbane. The anti-vaccination rallies have continued for weeks in Australia, becoming occasionally violent and attracting loose groups of regular citizens, as well as more organized groups of various leanings. The anti-vaccination movement, however, remains small, with some polls showing nationwide opposition only in the single digits. Thanks for tuning in with us today. I hope you stick around for Poland Daily Weather, Poland Daily Business, and other programs. But from me, it's have a great Saturday night.